When I'm not playing video games, you can usually find me outside rock climbing. Whether it be indoors at a climbing gym or outdoors on actual rock formations, rock climbing has been a big hobby of mine for a few years now. It's a sport that instantly clicked for me when I got into it. Instead of playing on a team where you can rely on others, but also have to work well with fellow teammates, your success as a rock climber depends solely on you. And when you fail, there is instant feedback telling you that you've made a mistake and that you need to try again. And that feeling of failure is visceral. As your body plummets back down to the ground, there's nothing you can do but look back, analyze why you failed, get back up, and start all over again. Rock climbing can be a tough and painful hobby to partake in. But despite the injuries I suffered, I still keep at it. And part of the reason why comes from a highly unlikely source.
We've got 2 to 3 fighters lined up. This is going to be one hell of a show.
When I first started taking fighting games seriously, I was about 17 years of age and had just picked up a copy of Street Fighter V Arcade Edition. I'd played other fighting games in the past when I was a little boy, including Soul Calibur 2 and Street Fighter 4. But I never got into them heavily. As a kid, I never bothered to learn how to properly play those games, learn all their mechanics, and partake in competitions. But as esports and esports competitions began to soar, and as video footage of these events started to become more readily available online, I wanted to dip my toes back into this genre with Street Fighter V. But when I did so, I immediately remembered why I had phased out of it. Even though I had been playing video games all my life, fighting games were still a relatively new genre to me. As a kid who grew up primarily on a diet of shooters, fighting game mechanics and terminology were still foreign to me. And when I was just starting with Street Fighter 4 being my main game, I primarily just button mashed, and didn't know you had to hold back on the controller to block. Over time I did learn certain concepts and get better at these games, but there were plenty of moments where I lost over and over again, whether it be to CPUs in-game or online against real opponents. At a young age, I had difficulty taking these losses. How is it that I could get high-level kill streaks in Call of Duty, but couldn't beat Seth on the easiest difficulty? And so for me, my enjoyment of fighting games primarily came from the sidelines. I loved watching high-level tournaments and watching my favorite competitors. Watching people like Daigo Uehara, Justin Wong, Momochi, and Tokido was how I learned and got better as a player. And even though I would move on to other games, I still had a casual interest in fighting games, coming back to it here and there to check out other new titles. But at the height of the Street Fighter V competitive scene, and when I finally decided to get back into it and take it more seriously, those feelings of childhood frustration came back to me.
Jumping.
Teach him a lesson, Mike.
What?
Mike, teach him a lesson. Teach him a lesson, Mike. Get him.
What is happening? The leg!
Playing ranked mode online became a battleground for me, as I had to mentally prepare myself for the stress of playing against real people and possibly even getting teabagged by other opponents. After all was said and done, still the highest rank I ever reached in Street Fighter V was Silver, but only for a brief moment before I was sent back down to Ultra Bronze. I spent many late nights in this vicious cycle of getting a win, feeling good about myself, ranking up, playing another game, and then losing. I'd then go on a losing streak, get sent back down a rank, and marinate in my salt. And so the cycle would continuously repeat itself. There was no one around that I could blame but myself. When we start a new venture in life, whether it be a new job, new hobby, or a new sport, there is always that elation of experiencing something new. If you start your own bakery, you get excited about setting your own hours and being your own boss. If you take up marathon running, you might get excited about joining a new club or buying new shoes. But not long after that, excitement and enthusiasm begin to wane, and we begin to realize the endeavor that we embarked on is a lot harder than we realized. The bakery you just opened up doesn't see many customers, and you're only losing money. Running with your new friends is fun, but you've now learned that you have a bad knee and that you need to start applying ice to it. This is about the point where most people would give up. It's also the point that's known as the Valley of Despair. In 1999, researchers David Dunning and Justin Kruger charted an individual's confidence with their competence over time. They found that initially, most people will highly evaluate their skills in a certain area, like driving, as being extremely high and greater than most other people. But when those skills eventually were tested, they weren't that special or apt at all, and the individuals they had asked had highly overrated themselves. This is what's known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people tend to overrate themselves and view themselves as more competent than others. This is simply because these individuals don't know any better, or because they've never been properly tested. And what happens when they are tested and they find out that they're not as competent or skilled as they thought, these individuals also tend to feel humbled, embarrassed, and maybe even a bit despondent. But the good news about the Valley of Despair is that most, if not all, professionals in their fields have gone through this period at some point in their lives. When we look at the top individuals in sports, it's hard to imagine that they too once struggled to throw a perfect spiral, shoot a basketball, or swing a golf club properly. But the truth is that these setbacks and periods of failure are what forge us into stronger individuals for the future. Failure is not something exclusive to any one individual, and neither is it exclusive to fighting games, rock climbing, or even sports in general. But after the Valley of Despair comes the slope of enlightenment. As time goes on, growth becomes more steadily attainable, and breakthroughs in thinking, abilities, and performance occur. But one can't get to that point before reaching the Valley of Despair. And yes, it can be tough to accept failure, especially when it physically causes pain, when we lose hours of progress, or even when we might not know why. The problem with failure is that it is subject to more attributional ambiguity than success. For success to occur, many things must go right. The person must be skilled, apply effort, and perhaps be a bit lucky. For failure to occur, the lack of any one of these components is sufficient. Because of this, even if people receive feedback that points to a lack of skill, they may attribute it to some other factor. Yes, even when we do fail, we still make excuses and say the sun was in our eye, our dog ate our homework, or maybe our controller unplugged. But sometimes taking responsibility for these outcomes, even to an extreme, is the only way we can grow and overcome. As I began accepting more of my in-game losses, I started to get better at the game. I'd save and re-watch some of my matches, both the ones where I won and lost. I'd go online to check out what other people discovered about other characters. And I'd stop stressing out so much about the game and take failure as a new opportunity to learn something new. These are all lessons I take with me into rock climbing. And again, these aren't any lessons exclusive to fighting games or sports in general. But it is cool to see how video games can have a life-changing effect on all of us, even after we've put the controller down. My name is Jay, and thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And if any other games taught you any important life lessons, feel free to leave that down in the comments below, as I'll be more than happy to check those out. Stay tuned for even more on the best that video games have to offer.